Hi, welcome to your shipper update. I'm Mike Vincent. He's Anthony Smith, our lead economist. Let's jump back into this really interesting stuff you got for us today.
Definitely. So, Mike, we were talking about how I have OTRI of all the indices up here because I definitely always go flatbed outbound tender rejection index,
Yeah.
but we're going for the overall. We have the reefer, van, flatbed, but overall. And so that's what we have here in this orange line. Sometimes Donnie Gilbert calls it red, but I think it's orange here. And in the orange line, we have this outbound. It's not orange, right?
It's orange.
It's orange. So we have this downward movement in the outbound tender rejection index here in the orange line. And in the blue line, we have the LMI, the Logistics Managers Index, similar to the PMI, wherein anything over 50 is indicative of expansion within the logistics world,
Right.
while anything below 50 is indicative of contraction. It's a composite measure, so this is going to be broken down into different components. This is the overall measure here. And what we can see is the relationship between the Logistics Managers Index and the Outbound Tender Rejection Index. As we were mentioning earlier, we have a near real-time index here in the Outbound Tender Rejection Index, the OTRI, and that's going to be on a daily basis that it gets updated. Not so much on the LMI, but it's still impactful and telling us what's happening within the landscape for the logistics managers. And so in this next chart, we're going to dive into one of those specific trends that also ties closely with the outbound tender rejection index, and that's going to be transportation prices. And we're seeing that slight easing in capacity here. We're in that green line. We switch it up orange to green. So in the green line here, we have outbound tender rejection index once more. In the blue line, we have the logistics managers index, but this is going to be specifically for transportation prices. And we're seeing a slight downward movement, Michael Vincent, here as capacity starts to somewhat ease.
Yeah, and that slight downward movement is reflected in the transportation prices kind of cresting this softer mound than,
Exactly.
than a huge spike.
Exactly.
Right? You see the trends here versus those trends would cause that kind of smoother change that is happening. And it's important that you pointed that out. These are leading indicators. The OTRI indicate where these trends are going, right?
Exactly.
They're, like the previous slide, they weren't diverging.
Right.
It's the LMI price index got to catch up
Exactly.
with where we're at. Yeah.
Exactly. And then it does a great job of saying where in the logistics managers world are we seeing some of these price increases or decreases. And so this is over transportation prices. But if we go to the next slide or next chart here, donuts, we're going to see warehousing prices right here in the blue line. And we have an 85.35, which is the all-time highest reading for the warehousing prices component for the LMI. And that's going to be one of those main areas. We were talking to Andrew Cox a little bit earlier about what's going on with warehousing. This is going to be one of those areas that is going to be very resistant to any kind of downward movement with price increases. And this is where a lot of that upward movement from transportation prices, not just with capacity overall within the logistics managers world, but shippers are going to need to keep their eye on warehousing prices and really kind of price that into their components and thinking.
Right. Yeah, jelly filled with powdered sugar. But these, I mean, this drives a lot of innovation as well.
Yeah.
Right. As we were talking before, this is look for micro refillment centers, repurposing of other buildings, et cetera. There's a ton of investment in new warehousing coming up. So, yeah, it's a sticky trend. It's going to stay there a while.
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
So on our next chart, we're going to look at the ISM. I couldn't stay away from it. Of course, I have the flatbed outbound tender rejection index. And again, I have the ISM, but I have it for manufacturing prices. So tying it all together, looking at upstream, because I like to look at it in flows. If you haven't seen the most recent economy lately, the streams and the flows. And so this is going to be upstream. And so when we're seeing those upstream price increases, it all flows downstream. We're seeing increases in prices in transportation. It's all going to continue to flow. And so shippers are going to have to keep that in mind. They're going to be seeing more these increased prices, although it's going to start easing a bit in the coming months here, most likely.
So real quick, what's the future sentiment look like? There are some future indicators in the LMI. What do they look like?
Exactly. So, and that those logistics managers are expecting some downward movement, some reprieve in prices. And as more capacity starts to come online, we're also starting to see something similar here, slightly with the outbound tender rejection index easing. So only time will tell, and I'll be sure to be watching this green line here at the outbound tender rejection index to keep it all updated on the latest.
We'll be listening, and thank you so much for that, Anthony, and we'll catch up with you again very, very soon.